Okay then, Year 11. Here we are with the poem Nearing 40 by Derek Walcott. So, the first thing to say about this is that it is an incredibly dense poem, probably the densest of the lot on the anthology. There's a lot to get through, a lot to say about it, and we'll try and cover as much of that as we can. So just bear with me. Okay, let's start by speaking about Derek Walcott himself. As you can see, I put a bit of context on here. Now, context, as you know from my previous videos, sometimes it's relevant to the poems and sometimes it's not. I think in this case, it is reasonably relevant in that the poet Derek Walcott is clearly kind of writing from his own viewpoint and kind of discussing emotions that he is personally going through. So Derek Walcott's a brilliant poet. He's born in St. Lucia in the West Indies in 1930, and he writes kind of poetry of the Western canon, so poetry of the style that we are used to. But within that, there's a lot of kind of island references and island kind of influences that are going on. But it's particularly sort of brilliant. So let's start with the title of this poem, Nearing 40. So clearly this is a poem which is about aging. You know, it's a poem about getting older. A lot of people, a poem about aging. You know, hitting 40 is quite a big milestone. And I suppose this is the point at which some people might have some sort of midlife crisis, and we'll get onto that a bit later on. So this poem, unlike I think any others in the anthology, has a dedication, and it's dedicated to a chap called John Figueroa, and this man is a Jamaican poet. And he is a presumed friend of Walcott's. Okay, so he's writing this for Figueroa or kind of towards Figueroa in some way. And then following that, there is a kind of quotation here from Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson, who many of you might have heard of, is an 18th century poet, writer, essayist, critic, etc., as I've written down there. And he says this, or Samuel Johnson wrote this: "The irregular combination of fanciful invention may delight a while, but that novelty of which the common satiety of life sends us all in quest. But the pleasures of sudden wonder are soon exhausted, and the mind can only repose on the stability of truth." So, a few things we need to kind of just clear up here. Firstly, the word, I think, satiety, you know, that just needs to be clarified. That comes from satisfied, okay, to be satisfied. So really, what he's saying is that our fanciful invention, our new things, may delight us for a while because they're a novelty, but soon we want more. Common satiety of life sends us all on the quest. So I'm just going to write down, always satisfied for a little while, but soon want more. Always satisfied for a while, but soon want more. And then the second bit, which says, "But the pleasures of sudden wonder are soon exhausted, and the mind can only repose in the stability of truth." And there, really what he's saying is that imagination can run wild, but in the end, we have to deal with life, okay? So imagination can run wild, but in the end, we have to deal with life. And you have to squeeze a lot in here. So hopefully it'll be very clear. Cool. So there we go. So that kind of sets a premise. He's writing to this chap, John Figueroa. It's clearly a poem about aging, And then there's this kind of idea that, yes, as poets, they're always kind of inventing things, and their imagination's running wild, but actually, there comes a point where you have to deal with real life. Okay, let's get into the poem. And we'll sort of chunk it up bit by bit and speak about what is going on. So, Insomniac since 4. Hearing this narrow, rigidly metered, early rising rain recounting as its coolness numbs the marrow, that I am nearing 40. So already we are thrown into this kind of world of, we're not, there's a lot of multiple meanings going on here. And you see that I've highlighted 4 initially. And that's because I'm confused. Okay, I'm trying to figure out what this means. Insomniac since 4. Well, an insomniac, as I'm sure you know, is someone who can't sleep, who has trouble sleeping. But then since 4. Well, what does that mean? Is that since 4 a.m.? So insomniac woke up at 4 a.m. and can't get back to sleep, or is it about age 4? Insomniac since aged 4, always been an insomniac since then. And this really sets the tone for Walcott's style of writing. We're never quite sure exactly of his meaning, what he's trying to say. There's kind of multiple plausible meanings, and there's always these kind of references and things. Rigidly metered, early rising rain. So, of course, here we've got this sort of, rigidly metered. Well, that tells us that this rain is falling kind of monotonously, okay? It's falling with spelled that badly, haven't I? Monotonous regularity. Okay, and then we're also told that this rain is early rising. And of course, that's a lovely example of personification being used. Monotonous, early rising rain. And of course, the tone here, if we're talking about rain, well, it's not a play. So, we're not going to call it pathetic fallacy, but it does sort of set what I'm going to call it a sullen mood, a sullen tone at the beginning of this. Okay? Rigidly metered, early rising rain recounting. Well, it's interesting here that there is there is a kind of self-awareness here. To speak about meter is what we speak about when it comes to poetry. So there's a self-awareness of the fact that this is a poem. Okay, self-awareness of poetry. And there is also, a sense that this might be a sort of metaphor for the whole poem, in that it sort of, could be quite rigid and metered. In some ways, it does have that as well. So hearing this now, originally metered, early rising rain. And again here, you see that in green, like in my other videos, my yellow highlighting is for language and my green is for structure. And here we've got some structural stuff going on. We've got the alliteration, RRR. We've got enjambment. As you can see, one line leads onto the next. And the general rhythm of it, rigidly metered, early rising rain recounting. Here we've got the actual writing itself, the structure itself, makes the writing sound like monotonous rain. Okay, so we're just going to put down that the alliteration, the enjambment, and rhythm sounds like rain. Okay. So, coolness numbs the marrow. The marrow, of course, being the bones. Okay? So it cools the bones. That I am nearing 40. That's what cools the bones. This idea that he is nearing 40. He's upset by this idea. Okay? And then he goes on to explain it, to go into more detail. Nearer the week, vision thickening to a frosted pane, nearer the day when I may judge my work by the bleak modesty of middle age, as a false dawn, fireless and average. Okay, so he's not very excited about this idea of getting older. Okay, not very excited about this at all. And of course, within this, he's speaking about, what happens to someone physically as they get older. Well, they get weaker, their vision starts to go, your sight starts to go as you get older. And you will notice there's also this kind of semantic field of cold. There's the frosted, there's the coolness and numbs. Okay, so we've got this semantic field of cold. And you'll notice, generally speaking, that older people do tend to go around in a few more layers, a few more cardigans. Okay, so again, all this stuff is about the physicality of aging that is being referenced here. Doesn't like this idea. But that's not the main issue here. Okay, also there's also the moment here about pain, and I like this vision thickening to a frosted pane. That's pain as in a window pane, but it also, of course, makes me think of pain, P-A-I-N, okay, which of course there's going to be an increase of as they get older. But this isn't the real worry. The real worry here is the next bit. Nearer the day when I may judge my work by the bleak modesty of middle age. He's mostly worried about the effect that aging will have on his work, okay? Worry about effect aging will have on work. Bleak modesty, the bleak modesty of it, as a false dawn, fireless and average. Okay, so the idea here that he's going to see his work as being particularly poor. His writing is going to get worse. He won't have the vitality of youth. Okay, he won't have this, his brilliance, his great imagination. Okay, it's going to become fireless and it's going to become average. Okay, kind of without passion, I suppose, is what he means by this. And of course, this is also emphasised this idea of it being fireless through this false dawn, fireless and average. These kind of use of fricatives here, which are making it seem. He's not happy about this situation. He's not happy about this situation at all. Which would be just because your life bled for the household truth, the style past metaphor that finds its parallel, however stretched in simple shining lines, in pages stretched plain as a bleaching bedsheet under a guttering rainspout. So, sudden change of tact here. He's been talking about himself and the effect that aging is going to have on him physically and on his work. But then he changes to a bit of direct address. He is speaking directly to our man Figueroa. We know this because he said that in the dedication. This is who he is going to write to. This is who he's writing about. And he says, your life bled for the household truth, okay? And what he's saying there, Figueroa was also a poet, as we know, that he always sought to write truthfully, okay? Figueroa always sought to write truthfully. And we'll just write that down. And I love this idea of, his life bled for it. Like, writing is actually, it's attached to physical hurt, okay? Physical hurt from writing poetry. but now, of course, the sense that, the poetry is actually going to be softened. The style past metaphor that finds parallel. So he was putting truth in front of the metaphor, kind of the truth comes first, that finds its parallel, however wretched, in simple, shining lines. So he's always written simple but truthful poetry. And we get the sense here that that Walcott is not necessarily that pleased about this. In pages stretched plain as a bleaching bedsheet under a guttering rain spout. Okay. And again, not pleased by this. There's a use of kind of plosives that are being used here. I've highlighted them. Plosives used. And it shows his kind of dislike of this style of simple poetry. And again, there's something in the bleaching bedsheet under a guttering rain spout. I almost get a sense here that is this a metaphor for the kind of incontinence that might come with middle age, or with old age, sorry. Hopefully not with middle age. This bleaching the bedsheet, wetting the bed. Constantly making this reference towards it. He's not being particularly nice about his apparent friend here. And again, kind of we've got the rain spout, this idea of the rain, that kind of tone that we had initially. It's extended, it's met again here. And then going on, glad for the sputter of occasional insight. You who foresaw ambition as a searing meteor will fumble a damp match and, smiling, settle for the dry wheezing of a dented kettle, for vision narrower than a Louvre's gap. Okay, so, glad for the sputter of occasional insight. Kind of saying here that actually, in old age, you only have kind of occasional moments of lucidity. That actually in his youth, he wrote kind of very insightful stuff, but as he gets older, that's lacking. Bring only moments of lucidity. Of speaking clearly, of saying interesting things. Because when he was young, Figaro as a young man was ambitious. But now... And so he's not, the important thing to say here is that, Walcott's not just talking about himself, getting older, or maybe the whole time he's just talking about Figaro, but he's certainly speaking about now, you're no longer ambitious, because now what's going to happen is you who foresaw ambition as a searing meteor will fumble a damp match and, smiling, settle for the dry wheezing of a dented kettle. So, here, this kind of fumbling, it's again, the age thing that's going on here for a damp match. It's a kind of, here, the damp match, an extension of this hot versus cold metaphor. But smiling is the important thing, okay? Even though, there's the idea that he's going to be reduced to this kind of fumbling old man, there is a contentedness, okay? There is a contentedness that goes on here. Contentedness. Despite descent into old age. And you're going to settle for the dry wheezing of a dented kettle. Now, there's loads of alliteration going on here. A damp match. A damp match for the dry wheezing of a dented kettle. Okay? So we've got this kind of dental alliteration again. And it's showing that he's not very happy about the idea of it. Dental alliteration, almost sort of spitting this stuff out. For vision narrower than a Louvre's gap, and that is a kind of, that's angled slats you have in roofs and stuff that let just a bit of air through a Louvre. So it's kind of, I'll put that down, angled slats to let a little air through. So basically saying, like, in your old age, you will have no vision, only a tiny little bit. Then, watching your leaves thin, recall how deep prodigious cynicism plants its seed, gauges our season by this year's end's rain. Okay, so your leaves thin, this here could almost be kind of, the hair, I suppose. So I forgot to say vision nearer, this is obviously a simile. Okay, so your hair thinning, and recall how prodigious cynicism plants its seed. So how actually, as you get older, you get more cynical. Okay? Cynical is to kind of be, to not really sort of see the good in things, I suppose. So great cynicism when you get older. Gauges our season by the year's end, which as greenhorns at school we'd call conventional for convectional. So going back to being a greenhorn is when you're sort of a new pupil. When you're a greenhorn, whoops. And just taking them back to school when they were really young, where they mistook these two words for each other. And of course, convectional is sort of a geography term, but conventional, there's irony with this because Figueroa's poetry has become conventional. So I think just a sense here that he is, he's not happy with the way things are going, with what's happening to Figueroa here. Okay, doesn't like this idea that, he's becoming conventional. Or you will rise and set your lines to work with sadder joy, but steadier elation. So, here we've got this lovely oxymoron, sadder joy, but steadier elation. Elation is happiness, but it's steady. It's not kind of a burst of emotion. It's kind of it's gentle happiness. And I suppose here what he's saying, and there's a hint of jealousy also in the speaker's tone here, in Walcott's tone here, because he's saying, he's sad at getting older, but there is an element of contentedness. Okay, sadness at aging, but a contentedness with the word, with the work. And this is the thing all the time here. It's quite a convoluted poem in some ways, because Walcott does, he's being critical, but he's also saying he's kind of quite jealous of the fact that he's content, because clearly Walcott has all of this angst of his own, which he's not, hugely happy about. Until the night when you can really sleep. And there, I suppose, he's talking about death, measuring how imagination ebbs, conventional as any water clerk who weighs the force of lightly fallen rain. And here, I suppose, he's speaking about the imagination ebbing, and that's kind of something moving. But generally, what the comparison here, comparing imagination to the ebbing of seawater. Until, again, we're coming back to the conventional here, until it becomes completely conventional as any water clerk who weighs the force of lightly falling rain. So until the poetry is now completely conventional. So conventional it can be weighed meticulously. Okay. Which, as the new moon moves it, does its work even when it seems to weep. Okay, so the moon, like we know, moves the tides, it moves the water, and there's lovely personification there of the moon. And personification moon crying, moon weeping, which is really lovely. And again, there's kind of the island influence going on here, thinking about the tide and the seas surrounding it. And it sort of reflects, I think, the speaker's state of mind. You know, there is a sadness here, very much. And he's sad because he's aging, and he's sad because his friend is aging, and he's losing his imagination, but also there's a jealousy because he thinks, you know, he's going to be more content. I've noted some stuff here, the nasal alliteration and the assonance. And there's almost a softness to the end of the poem. There's length and there is softness. And sorry, I don't know what's happening to my pen, but it seems to be not writing very well now. And noticeably, this here is the only full stop of the whole poem. So it's almost like this kind of stream of consciousness writing, okay? And stream of consciousness is basically just letting everything out, letting your emotions and your ideas flow. And I think you probably get a sense of this, the fact that it is, you know, quite a convoluted poem. It's supposed to be quite convoluted. You know, what's the general message? The general message, I suppose, is that he's sad at getting old. I've said this a few times. He is sad at getting old. He's worried about what's going to happen to him, but he's also using it to kind of pick at his friend, whose poetry he clearly thinks has weakened as he's got older. But he's also quite jealous of the contentedness that the friend will feel, while he is clearly quite sad. The speaker is clearly quite sad. So we've said a lot there, a huge amount, as you can see. Gosh, wow, okay. Let's just get on to a bit about the rhyme scheme. So, as I've written here, there is a rhyme scheme. Sort of. There's moments of rhyming, and there's also slant rhyme. Slant rhyme is kind of half rhyme. So if you look back up here, there's week and work. Sort of rhyming, but not quite. There's age and udge. Okay, so there's this sort of stuff going on. In fact, age and udge is a what we would call a homograph. Okay, it's a homograph. So there's two things that are spelt the same but said differently. So there is this sort of rhyme scheme, and this sort of rhyme scheme you know, is perhaps, as I've written here, reflective of the changing rain, this changing rain throughout, and of course the rain we keep coming back to. And then speaking about the meter's really important here. There is a mixture of iambic, unstressed, stressed, and trochaic, stressed, unstressed meter. So Shakespeare, iambic, dudum, dudum, but trochaic, dumda, dumda. Okay, and so it changes, and it's mainly pentameter. So like Shakespeare, it's mainly 5, da-dum, 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 da-dum. But sometimes it's longer. But there's definitely rhythm. There's definitely rhythm that comes from this slightly convoluted, and convoluted being the key word here, meter. So why is this used? Well, it's quite lyrical. Okay, it seems lyrical, and again, that's part of Walcott's island influence. It's part of, it's, you know, it's just, you know, it's his style of poetry. But it's also, as we've established at the end there, it's stream of consciousness stuff. And the stream of consciousness means that it can't be perfect. So there should be lyricism to it, but it can't be perfect because it's all coming out in a kind of slightly random fashion. And then, as we know, it's a convoluted poem. And so the sort of rhythm, but not quite perfect rhythm, is perhaps, as I've written here from my third bullet point, reflective of his changed state of mind in his midlife crisis. He's got this massive midlife crisis going on. He's going through it. He's internalizing it. He's taking it out on his friend, John Figueroa. And that's reflected again in this strange, convoluted rhythm. But importantly, at no point does it become monotonous, as this whole poem is meant to be incredibly thought-provoking, and I think it is indeed thought-provoking. And I encourage you to, if you haven't already, read it out loud a couple of times, because you will get that sense of it, that feel of it, of this kind of brilliant, convoluted, dense, lyrical poem. And it's a fantastic one, I have to say. It's probably my favourite poem on the anthology. It's hard, but if you can get your head around it, if you can grasp the dense stuff that's in there, and you might have to watch this video a couple of times, then I think you probably will appreciate it. And if it were to come up in the exam, you would have so much to write about, and the difficulty there would be in selecting the right things to write about. And just remember, judicious selection of evidence, thinking very carefully about what you say, because there is far too much to say about this poem in just one essay. But I hope that's helped with Nearing 40 by Derek Walcott, and thank you for listening.